Welcome to this Victorian plumbing guide where I'm going to teach you how to tile a wall. This video is to be used as a guide only, and we always advise that you seek professional help. Step one of any tiling job is surface preparation and setting out. So this wall we're tiling today has been prepared with Jacko board. So that is tile backer board, and tile backer board is perfect to tile straight onto without any primers or any other necessary steps. We can tile straight to a purposely built tile backer board. If you're tiling to other surfaces and substrates, the best thing to do is look on the back of your tile adhesive, and that will give you instructions to prime and prepare the surface. And it's key that we spend some time making sure that the surface is nice and flat and that there's no holes or lumps and bumps, because that will give you the best possible surface to get a nice professional finish. The next step is to set out your tiles, and the purpose of setting out tiles is to find the most visually appealing pattern possible so that when you stand back and look at it, it looks really nice. The first thing you want to do if you're tiling a wall is find the center of the wall. So I'm using my tape measure to find the center of the wall, and I'm making a mark on the center. You could then use a level to extend that line up the wall. If you've got access to a laser level, that's a great way to continue that line up the wall, because it can sometimes be easier later on in the job to see that line throughout the process. I've repeated that for the height of the wall as well, so that we can get a true center top to bottom. Now we're using long 900mm tiles today, but this process is the same regardless of whatever size tiles you're using, whether you're using small tiles or long ones like this. The process is the same. So as part of my setting out, I'm going to place my first tile with the edge of the tile on my center line. I'm then going to dry lay my tiles. You could use a tile gauge, you can make them from timber, but I like to do it this way. I dry lay my tiles, and that way I'm going to get a good visual representation of the cuts that I'm going to get once I actually start to apply the adhesive and get these tiles on the wall. By doing that, we can see we've got a nice big cut at the edge, so we're not going to end up with any small slivers of tile, because that is what we want to avoid. If that wasn't the case and we had a small sliver of tile in the corner, what we could do is straddle the line with the tile so that the tile is halfway across the line. We could then maneuver the tiles up, and by straddling the line, you can see we get a very small cut, which is not very visually appealing. So that small cut being the case, we want to make sure we use the first option where we run the edge of the tile along the line. That gives us the perfect cut. The beauty of finding the center of the wall is that whatever you get that side of the line, you will also get this side of the line. We'll also do that vertically so that we can plan out the cuts at the top and the bottom of the wall, and it's very important that we spend some time doing this because it's going to pay off later in the job. Once your setting out is done, the next thing we need to look at is how we cut tile. There's plenty of different tile cutters available: manual tile cutters, wet cutters, and grinders with cutting discs. You can use a manual tile cutter like this for the majority of the cutting. It's only the more intricate cuts where you'll need a grinder with a tile cutting disc. Manual tile cutters work with a disc that scores the tile. You can then snap the tile to your desired length, and that gives you a nice clean finish. Now we're going to move on to the type of tile adhesive, how we prepare it, and how we apply it to the wall. You'll need a bucket trowel, a large flexible bucket, and a paddle mixer. A large paddle mixer like this is not really required. You can use the ones that just attach to a drill. And this is a flexible tile adhesive that's correct for our application. You can read the technical advice on the back of the bag, and that'll tell you what these adhesives are suitable for. A flexible adhesive is perfect for what we're using today. To mix your adhesive, add a couple of inches of water in the bottom of a bucket. I'm then using my bucket trowel to add my adhesive to the water. I'm then using the paddle mixer to begin to thicken the mixture up. When the adhesive starts to stand on its own like that, that's the perfect consistency, nice and creamy, not too thin, because you do want it to be able to hold its shape. So now we've got the adhesive mixed up, we're nearly ready to start tiling the walls. We've got a center point, we've got tiles prepared to work away from that center point. There's a few more things I'd advise you get. A small torpedo level, they're brilliant for leveling the tiles. We're going to need to make sure that that first course of tiles is absolutely perfectly level, and we're going to keep checking as we go up the wall. 3mm tile spacers, these are a good place to start. 3mm is a very generic size, and this is a 6mm notched trowel. 6mm will give us a nice coverage, plenty of adhesive to get those tiles on. So when we're applying adhesive, first thing we want to do is just get it on the wall. Once we start to get some adhesive on the walls, what we're looking to do is start to make those nice notched lines in one direction. What we don't want is to do that. If we do that, what happens is we trap air within the adhesive and that causes air bubbles. And what that does is restricts the contact between the tile and the wall. So what we want to do is drag a nice bed of adhesive in one direction, just like that. The next thing we need to do with the adhesive on large format tiles is to back butter the tile. Small tiles you don't need to, large format we want to make sure we're getting a good adhesion. So what we do is just get some adhesive on there and then we can place that tile, and you can see why a laser level is good, because we can still see the line even if we've got adhesive covering a line. If we had a pencil, you could end up with the pencil line covered. Now it's important that we start as we mean to go on and check the levels of the tiles. This tile needs to move over very slightly at the top. I'm just going to pop a packer under there, so that tile is now perfectly level. We can now continue to tile in that direction until we get to the cuts in the corners. Once you're confident that the first course of tiles are perfectly level, using either a laser level or a traditional level, what you can do is continue working your way up the wall. Using those techniques that you've already seen in the video, cutting the tile, placing the tile into the adhesive, applying the spacers to get a perfect 3mm gap, just keep working your way up the wall. So that is the first wall done. Now we're going to look at cutting tile trim for the edge of our tiles. This is 10mm tile trim. Make sure you choose a size that's correct for the tiles that you're using. We're using 8mm tiles, so 10mm. By the time we've put a little bit of adhesive on there, this should be perfect. Now we're going to cut our tile trim. For this, we're going to use a miter block and a hacksaw. I'll place the trim in the miter block and cut through it with the hacksaw. Now we can just tidy that cut end up with a file. So where do we place the tile trim? Well, we've done the setting out, so we know where each tile is going to go along this wall, and we know that this is our end tile. Therefore, we know that our tile trim needs to finish the edge of this tile all the way up the wall. So I've laid my last tile in position and I've marked it on the wall with a pencil. You can see that mark there. I now need to extend that all the way up the wall. Now I've run a laser level up the wall. I've also got a traditional spirit level, and I'm going to place my trim on that mark we made at the bottom where the edge of the last tile is going to be. Place the trim and then use a level just to make sure it's nice and plumb. Once you're happy it's nice and plumb, extend the line up the wall so that you've got a nice line running all the way up the wall. Of course, if you've got a laser level, it's easier because you can take all of this away and you've still got a line. So we now know where the trim is going to go all the way up to the top of the wall, and we can get some adhesive on here to stick it in place. Apply a thin amount of tile adhesive just back from the line, and then stick your tile trim to the adhesive, and then just check it's plumb. If you're tiling horizontally, you can do this stage later and pop it in just before your top course of tiles. That is actually a little bit easier in some circumstances, and you don't have to tile so quickly. Now we're going to have to tile fairly quickly, because if we have to make any small adjustments to this, of course that adhesive is going to go off. So we best get on and tile the rest of this wall. Once you've applied all your tiles, just go around, take out all the spacers, and then just scrape away any bits of adhesive left on the surface. So now the wall's clean, we're going to look at mixing and preparing our grout. That grouting process is what gives you the finished look. First, choose a grout colour of your choice. This is just white grout. Then we're going to need 2 clean buckets, a paddle mixer to mix the grout. We also need a measuring cup to measure out the amount of grout that we want, and some bottled water. Bottled water is always better than tap water because it prevents limescale, especially in hard water areas. For the application process, you'll want a grouting sponge and a float to apply the grout. A good place to start is a 5:1 mix ratio. So I add my grout and add my water to a clean bucket. I then mix it with a paddle mixer until I've got the correct consistency. So now we've got our grout mixed into a thick paste. We're going to set that aside for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to grout this wall. And our aim is to fill all those grout joints so that they're nice full joints with no gaps in them. That'll give us a nice clean look. But in a shower area like this, it's even more important that those grout joints are nice and full, because that is what waterproofs the whole job. So we're just working that grout in one direction and working in small areas at any time. Don't try and take on big areas because you'll find that it gets out of control with its drying times, but also it gets confusing and you could end up missing a grout joint if you try and take on too larger area at one time. So remember to just work in small areas on the wall. Grout and sponge for this next bit, make sure it's wrung out, you don't want it too wet, and we're going to flatten these joints now. Once the grout has started to go off, it's started to stiffen very slightly, we can run that sponge, gentle pressure, diagonally across the grout joints. And what that's going to do is take off any excess and give us nice, smooth joints. Work in one direction, have good attention to detail, make sure it looks all nice and uniform as you work across that grout. Don't push too hard because you will end up taking out too much grout and having to come back and repair the grout joints. If you do have to make any repairs to the grout joints, it's better to do it now rather than later. Once the grout hardens even more, I like to then go over and do one more sponge. And what that's going to do is just take out any little deviations in that grout, any fine deviations. And it also makes it easier to come along a little bit later and do a polish up. The final stage to the grouting process, I like to grab a damp microfiber and I just go over the tiles with that damp microfiber, and then I get a dry microfiber and I buff the whole thing and give it a nice shine up, and that will take the haze off the tiles and leave you with that nice shiny finish. And that only really leaves us with one last step. Now we're going to use a sanitary silicone and run down the corners to finish the job off. You can get matching silicone colours. Of course we've got white because we've got white grout, but you can get matching silicone colours for different colour grouts just to give it that nice finished look. That's come out really nice. I'm really happy with that, and that is how you tile a wall. You can find a large range of tiles online at Victorian Plumbing, including these tiles we've used here today. We'll pop a link in the description to our range of tiles. See you next time.